I was worried about Prince Harry and the loss of his security. I suppose I'm more worried about Nigel Farage's security. I don't particularly care for Nigel Farage, but I think a British MP who is almost certainly a target for nastiness deserves protection. And a Britain in which political debate is becoming uglier and more personal. The Prime Minister, rattled by Reform UK's surge and Nigel Farage's rise as an authentic voice of the populist right, has chosen to attack the man rather than debate the ideas. We now have a governing party that appears willing to stigmatise a rival with epithets such as racist or snake oil merchant, and to turn what should be argument about policy into a contest of character assassination. Now, at Labour's conference, Sir Keir called Reform's proposal to force non-EU permanent residents to apply for visas racist and immoral. I think he's right about that. But then he went on to brand Farage a snake oil salesman who doesn't like Britain and blamed him for the small boats crisis, even labelling the vessels Farage boats. Well, I think he's got a point about the Farage boats, but the snake oil salesman and somebody who Farage is someone who doesn't like Britain, these are not the words of a Prime Minister. These are the words of someone like me, a commentator, a wag on the other end of YouTube. It sits ill in my mind to hear these things from a man whose job is to bring the country together. Within days, Reform revealed that Farage's taxpayer-funded security detail, which had protected him since entering Parliament, was slashed by 75%. The cut was made by parliamentary security officials, but inevitably it looks political given the timing. Political leaders have always used sharp words, but Britain has also tried to maintain a norm of safety and basic fairness for all MPs, including those we dislike. Two things now collide. The incendiary rhetoric, ministers and Labour MPs went beyond policy criticism. Some invoked Hitler, youth, or Nazism. Lammy, I think, was the person responsible for that. Others conflated Reform with far-right hate groups. At a time of elevated threats to politicians, we have the murders of Joe Cox and Sir David Amess, and the killing of Charlie Kirk hangs in the air. Stripping protection from a highly polarising figure looks reckless and worrying. The principle is simple. In a democracy, we argue fiercely, but we keep our opponents physically safe. Starmer's approach borrows from continental politics, create a cordon sanitaire, paint Reform as beyond the pale and consolidate the centre-left. He hopes to make the next election a referendum on Farage, but Britain doesn't have a French two-round system. Calling a third of the electorate racist risks hardening them, not shaming them. History warns against this too. Hillary Clinton's deplorables remark fueled Trump. Kamala Harris's 2024 anti-Trump moral panic backfired. Project Fear failed over Brexit. Demonisation often strengthens rather than weakens populists, particularly in Britain. When a Prime Minister blurs the line between robust criticism and delegitimisation, then, coincidentally or not, that opponent's security is cut, trust in the neutrality of state institutions erodes. Even if Starmer didn't order the downgrade, the perception of punitive action chills democratic confidence. Reform's donors now fund private security, but a functioning democracy shouldn't require opposition leaders to rely on wealthy backers for their personal safety. What should happen next is that we should reform political pluralism. An attack on Farage's policies, migration numbers, economic efforts is perfectly reasonable, but avoid personal slurs if you're the Prime Minister. Risk assessments must be seen as apolitical and proportionate. If threat levels have not dropped, protection should not be quietly removed. And voters want change, but also integrity. Smears and moral panics may energise activists, but they degrade public trust. Starmer's tactic is not only wrong in principle, it's likely to fail in practice. By framing politics as stop Farage at any cost, he risks unifying the right, alienating the centre, and shredding Labour's claim to moral seriousness. I agree with his motive. I disagree with his method. If I had been Prime Minister, I would have had conversations with the Lib Dems, I would have had conversations with the Conservatives, and I would have tried to engineer some sort of unity that would offset the power of Farage, because it's in the interests of the Lib Dems, of the Conservatives, and of Labour to keep Farage at bay. But this method doesn't work. This method is madness. And it's cruel and foolish, and I think in the end sort of self-fulfilling. Democracies need fierce disagreement, but they also need fair play and physical safety for rivals. On both counts, this episode is a dangerous warning signal.